Hello and welcome to the Satluj TV podcast. Our returning guest today is a retired US Army colonel. Originally born in Punjab, a few years after partition, he received his education in India, but completed his postgraduate after emigrating to the US, and it was then he was commissioned into the US Army. But it was in the early 1980s, while studying applied political science, that he discovered an entirely different perspective of Muhatma Gandhi. His research uncovered a very different truth behind the carefully crafted image of the man so widely revered, which he detailed in two successive books, Gandhi Behind the Mask of Divinity and his follow-up title, Gandhi Under Cross-Examination. So I'm very pleased to welcome back to the Satluj TV podcast my guest today, Colonel G.B. Singh. Colonel Singh, welcome. Thank you for joining us once again today.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Now, Colonel Singh, we focused on Gandhi's early life in our last discussion, how it shaped him into the person that he became. But contrary to his benign public persona, Gandhi was a devout believer in the caste system. Now, we've discussed the caste system and the caste hierarchy at great length on our channel in recent months, so I'd like to focus today, if I may, on this specific area. And perhaps we could start off with taking just a deeper look at the hierarchy itself. Could you, Colonel Singh, perhaps give us a brief description of the structure of the caste hierarchy?
All right. There are basically four levels of the caste hierarchy. You have Brahmins, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. The top three collectively are called upper caste. The bottom one is called Sudra, and it means slave. And majority of the population is right here at the bottom. Now, depending on, there's a fine tuning here. That means if you look at one caste group, there could be hundreds or even thousands of subcastes. Okay? So depending on which caste you say, then you go with the subcaste. Like Gandhi. Gandhi comes from this group, number 3. But his subcaste would be Gandhi. Gandhi name as a grocer. Okay? So when you come down to this group, Sudras, slaves, even within that there are subgroups, subcastes. And then there's another group below that. Some may say they are outside the system. Some say even doesn't matter, they are still at the very bottom. These are what we call untouchables. Okay? Now, there is another group even below than that. It is called totemistic castes. Totemistic castes, they are really displaced by long distances from these people. So we're not getting into those people. But the untouchables are actually there somewhere outside the village. Periphery of the village. So they are there. Your eyes can see them actually, as opposed to the totemistic caste. So the bottom, the untouchables, during Gandhi's time, there were about 60 million of them, somewhere around in British India. Today, there are about 200 to 250 million of them in today's India. Now, this is generally what the caste hierarchy is. Now, the top three castes, what we call upper caste, that's roughly about 15, maybe even 16% of the population. That means the very bottom is about 84% of the population. It really is a hierarchy, okay? In a true sense, the deal here is, historically, how did these people end up at the bottom? That's a whole different topic, what really happened or might have happened, because we really don't have historical accounts at the time. But they are the very definition of caste, according to Swami Vivekananda, the very famous man within there. He said caste is nothing but race. It's really a racial feature. Maybe one time contrast was like a black and white. Well, today they're all brown or various shades of brown, or maybe some more blackish there. But nonetheless, these people at the very bottom, untouchables, are also referred to as black people of India because they exhibit more blackness in their skin color. So if you go by that definition, it is a race, and I tend to believe that it is a race, even though superimposed by division of labor and few other elements, just to confuse us. But it really is a racial phenomena, not in what we used to see in America and some of Europe, white versus black, such a contrast. Not in this case. It is all brownish, okay, with shades of brownish, okay? So, and that makes it a little bit more difficult for a Westerner to understand how is that possible. But it is possible once you're born and raised there, because you would know how to differentiate one from the other. From deep inside, you would know that. Now, today, I asked an individual, if I'm meeting somebody, I'd simply ask, would you please tell me what your caste or subcaste is? And from there, I will know what I'm dealing with. Now, during President Richard Nixon's time, he had a deep interest in the caste. He used to count something like a little more than 4,000 subcastes, and he was just wondering, how did this system come about? Today, I've been told it's more than about 6,000 or even close to 7,000 subcastes. You see how complicated this can be.
Where just to for somebody who really finds this whole subject so complex and quite baffling, how on earth is somebody defined by caste? And when we talk about so many thousands of subcastes, how is somebody defined? What defines their caste? What criteria is it that puts them into these little boxes?
Well, as you say, you use the word right, baffling. It is baffling. Now, when I meet today's untouchables, those who are educated, I happen to meet them, and I put my skin right next to them, and I ask them, what makes you untouchable and me not an untouchable? There's no answer, because it looks same. The color looks same. But it is because it's ingrained deep inside, the brainwashing is deep inside. It has been going on for thousands of years. You are born in that family. You're born. It's not something you become out of the blue and untouchable. You're born into it. You're born in the family. And right from the very day you are conceived, it is a totalitarian mode of life that you live that according to the laws. The laws are dictated essentially by a group of Hindu scriptures called Dharma Shastras. There are about a little more than 100 of them. So your facet of life, your outlook on life is totally dictated by that deep inside subjugated levels. So it's very difficult even for an educated untouchable to come out of it because it's trapped you deep inside. Okay, so when Gandhi, I hope we're getting into Gandhi. So when Gandhi came into the system, he's upper caste. And last time when we talked about it, when he goes to South Africa, and when he sees Negroes there, black people of South Africa, automatically for him, they are at the bottom. They are the untouchables, so to speak. Okay? Automatically, he doesn't have to question his ideology. It's just automatically, okay? So now, 1915, he comes back to India and he's called Muhatma, okay? And of course, the untouchables are there. It didn't catch his attention until in the middle of the second nationwide satyagraha, 1920-21. That's where now he realizes that with all this drama that he's playing against the British, and he's telling the Indians about this independence, Swaraj, and obviously he's not going to get it. He's going to fail. So he always has a backup. he can say to the Hindus or the Indians, well, the reason they are failing is because they practice untouchability. Untouchability. That is the laws that are ingrained to practice to make sure the untouchables at the very bottom. Untouchability is a term that even Indian law has not defined it. And Indian constitution, they put it like the quotation marks. Though nobody has defined it, but it is called untouchability. So Gandhi now is prescribing the Hindus, as long as they prescribe or as long as they practice untouchability, they're not going to get independence, or words to that effect. And that's where 1921 it starts. So you start to fiddle with the system, just like a comma, in the sense, you remember we said untouchables at the bottom of the caste hierarchy, beyond it. Well, all Gandhi is doing is, hey, wait a minute, let's not put them beyond, let's put them into the Sudra caste, but at the very bottom of it. That is the lowest of the subcastes of the Sudra. Does it really change anything? It really doesn't, because slaves, that is Sudras, slaves are going to always have their own slaves. It's a really fascinating system. Slaves have their own slaves. Now, during the time when we had black people slaves in America, we never had a system like that. Either you're master or you're slave. But in this system, even slaves have their own slaves. And those are untouchables.
And maybe that is the power. I was just going to say that maybe that is the power of the system, and maybe why it has lasted for so many thousands of years, because it's very clever in the way it's designed, as you say, that even slaves have slaves. So of course they have some stake in the success of the system, because even they themselves have their own slaves. The only losers in the whole system are those at the very, very bottom, whereas everybody else above them is benefiting in some way from this same system.
Amazing. It really is. And none of us really know for sure how this whole thing came about, because we don't have the contemporary historical documents. But we see the effect of it. And we know that there are a whole number of Hindu scriptures subscribe to this kind of stuff. Okay? It's sort of a Hindu Sharia. It really is a Hindu Sharia in practice. Okay? That's really what it is. Yeah. Now, so when Gandhi comes back in British India, what he's doing is, when he starts to play with the system, now he recognizes that during that particular time, there is increasing pressure, that there's a possibility this huge block of 60 million untouchables might leave the fold of Hinduism. They might adopt Christianity, Islam, Sikhism, or whatever. So he, and being a Hindu, bona fide, politically minded Hindu, he realizes that he cannot allow them to move away, slip into something else. So he has to come up with a way to make sure they stay within the system. And he also has to come up with another way that his image, remember last time we said it's the missionaries, the Christians, the pastors and reverends, the clergies, who are really taking his beautiful image and planting it outside. So he also, if he fights against the untouchability, he also looked like Jesus, as if he's like Jesus' image trying to help out the lepers and so forth. So that image, it blends in with that particular image. And it's a beautiful way to make sure he looks good in the churches, especially in the West. So Gandhi had nothing to lose but give it a try. And he did. So what he's doing is he wants to make sure that untouchables as a group never are able to get organized. That means never let them get organized so that they remain dissipated and so that he can control them. That's number one. The caste Hindus, Gandhi also knew, him himself being a caste Hindu, make sure that he never step on to the interests of the caste Hindus. He can talk about it, but never hurt their cause, never hurt their interests. And make sure the propaganda, the false flag operations continue so that his image as a man who's trying to make these people's lives, or these so-called social lepers, their life better. Okay? And that is keep the propaganda going on and just going on. And we'll talk about that, what kind of stuff he was doing. And by doing that, his image worldwide is depicted as a Jesus incarnate, or really a second coming, so to speak. So that Gandhi had nothing to lose, everything to gain. This is what he's playing. Okay?
So, can you give me some examples then of how Gandhi, at least on the face of it, helped the untouchables? What sort of things did he do? I mean, clearly he's coming across once again as the master manipulator. He is this character who is manipulating both almost all sides. Always with his image in mind, but clearly with an agenda of his own. So he is using the untouchables for his own purposes. Once again, as I say, the master manipulator. So what sort of things did he do in practical terms? What was he doing to, on the face of it, help the untouchables? And what actually was going on behind the scenes?
Well, very good. I mean, for example, I'm giving you, like in the second Satyagraha, when he's telling the Hindus that they need to get rid of this untouchability, he created a fund. It's called Tilak Swaraj Fund. And it collected a whole bunch of money. Now he's telling that I'm going to collect this money, I'm going to spend this money for the welfare of the untouchables. It's so they can remove the untouchability. What he's doing is taking a penny out of this huge fund. And then he said, well, we're going to use this penny to remove untouchability. Obviously, it's not going to work. But so that's just one idea during the middle of the second Satyagraha. But then last time, when he moved to 1930 or 31, Pune Pact, or 1932, I think you and Dr. Gerber talked about it. Now, that's where a big momentum came up, because he had already participated in a last Satyagraha, that is Salt Satyagraha, and he really attained a great notoriety all over the world. Time magazine had put him in the Person of the Year. So he is very famous now. It's a perfect setup. Now he can go and take next step and tell the world that he is now there to make life better for the untouchables. So how do you do it? Here we go. First thing, he named these people Harijan, Harijan. Harijan means children of God. So he names them, okay? Then he says he started a newspaper. The newspaper is also called Harijan. Okay? He's telling the world that, see, I'm really committed to the cause. Now, how do you do that at a more practical level? Well, he said, the Hindu temples, for example, the Hindu temples need to be opened for these people so that they can come and worship. Okay? Which really had an impact, especially on African American leaders, church leaders. Oh, Gandhi's influence was so great that the temples got opened to this untouchables so they could come and worship. It had an impact. The other thing was public wells. In the villages, the water supply, there's maybe a common one well, maybe multiple wells, but the untouchables would be left out of it. So Gandhi now wants in the villages so that untouchables can use the public wells. I mean, this is good stuff. And in the schools, he wants the elementary schools, middle schools, sort of the village schools need to be opened up for the untouchable children. I mean, these are basically three of them, three features. Now, let's go back to the temples. Now, when he started this movement, which again, as I said, a lot of people, religious folks in the West, is very attracted to them, temples, worship. So what's the result? Well, here it is. 142 temples were opened. But there's a click here. Out of that, 121 of them were waste temples. That means they were lying out there in the remote places. Nobody uses them. So those temples opened up. Okay? Those temples opened up. Hey, guys. So you can see where this is going. And there are very, very few temples that might have opened up, and untouchables, if they're going, how they were treated, that's a whole different story. In other words, there's really not much going on other than a propaganda. Now, in Gandhi's own state, Gandhi's own Gujarat, not a single temple opened up for these people. Okay? In other words, this is a failure, it's a false flag operation going on, so to speak. But it has a value in America. It has a value in the Western countries, but it doesn't really have any value where it needs to have a value. Let's look at public wells. Public wells, it did not have, no caste Hindu. No caste Hindu is going to share the public wealth with these people. I mean, it doesn't matter what. The whole system actually turned out to be essentially a failure. Okay, they have to find another source of water if they're going to live right next to the village. Okay, now schools are even more important. For example, there's a village called Kavitha, Kavitha. It's a village in Gujarat, Gandhi's own home state. The untouchable, because Gandhi's propaganda is so big, and so the untouchable families in that village, they say, you know what, there's a common school here. They would like their children also to go to these schools. So that's the same school where the upper caste children go. Nothing wrong with that. Why not? Now, the issue became a little bit hot. And the message and the issue was brought to Gandhi's that what do we do? Because upper caste parents, they don't want these children to come to their schools. So the matter has to be resolved by Gandhi. And guess what Gandhi said? He gave in to the upper caste interests because they don't want it. So he is asking now untouchable families that it's better for them to move somewhere else. Whether they moved or not, I don't know, because there's no follow-up. But what bottom line is, when it came down to that, rubber meets the road, Gandhi is not out there to help out the untouchables. He gives in to the wishes of the upper caste. Here's another big one. He started what we call Harijan Sevak Sangh. It's a society that helps out, is what we call, it's a society, it's a charitable society to help out the untouchable welfare, okay? And the branches are spread all over. And boy, it's a wonderful thing. He wants to show to the world that he is now going all over India to help out them. But there's a conditions. Condition is going to act like a penance for the upper caste, because they are the ones who practice untouchability. So the membership, the board of trustees, all of these stuff is going to be run by the upper caste. No untouchable would be a member of these organizations. So since it is meant to welfare of the untouchables, he's asking the upper caste to put in some money for the cause, so that he can really show to the world that we're doing this. The problem is upper caste are not going to give money for this cause. Upper caste is not going to give the money specifically for the welfare of the untouchables. It's just not going to happen. And guess what? Money did not come. There was always acute shortage of funds. And eventually, these organizations, charitable organization, is there in name only. Nothing happens at a level. So one of the tragedies as I was going through research is I'm looking at for example, the African American, the black churches, or some other white pastors. Not a single one of them went back to India and said, let me look into it. Is it really true this is happening? There's none. They just accepted it. The word of wisdom, the holy Mahatma, the holy man, is doing the miracles just like Jesus did 2,000 years ago. So they accepted that. And because they accepted that, his name, Gandhi's name, became more holy in the churches. Okay? And this is how Dr. King was Martin Luther King was so impressed that these are the miracles Dr. Gandhi is bringing about in the society. In Dr. King's mind, all these Hindu temples are opened. Okay, Brahmins and the untouchables, they're all getting together and they're worshiping together. I mean, this is something he's visioning it, but in reality, these kind of things never happened. But 10,000 miles away, these things are happening in the mind. Okay, so this is kind of stuff going on. But again, as I said, his main big thing for him is, if ever these people leave in block or in large majority, it will seriously hamper the Hindu cause. The very upper caste being barely about 15 to 16%. And if these people just wipe out the base, the whole thing will crumble. And in a way, it's true. If 85% of these people, or even 25% of them leave, there's a likelihood this whole hierarchy will crumble. Gandhi was quite smart on that in order to preserve the hierarchy, he wants to make sure the hierarchy stays intact. And by doing that, the untouchables remain within the fold. Remain within the fold of Hinduism. And when you look back, you got to say that Gandhi was quite successful. Even the British could not change it. Even the British could not change by even a small point. And they were in authority. They were the people who had power. Even they could not touch it.
I think it's very clear.
That's how entrenched.
Yeah, and it's very clear that Gandhi's agenda has really become very clear. And all these things that you've talked about, they are, I would call them paper victories. They mean an awful lot on paper, and they look great in a public relations context, but in practical terms, they are absolutely meaningless. And of course, the prime example of that are the temples in places in remote areas. It looks good on paper, but in practice, it is absolutely meaningless. And of course, the obvious question there is, if Gandhi was such a benign person who genuinely felt the empathy and sympathy for the untouchables, he would have attacked the system itself. He would have tried to break apart the hierarchy. He would have destroyed the hierarchy. Instead, he's treating the symptoms. He's not treating the root cause. So, and there is no evidence then that I can see that Gandhi tried to actually break down the system. Instead, he very happily aligned with the system, but just played around with the edges, it appears.
Yep, that's true. You're right. He actually, when you read Gandhi and his caste ideology, you really find that he absolutely believes in the fundamentals of it. Now, sometimes he would play games. For example, the word caste, C-A-S-T-E, is a Portuguese term. When the Portuguese came there, they are the ones who coined the term, okay? So Gandhi will, when he sees that they're to tune into the Western audience, well, he must say, no, I don't agree with the caste system. I don't agree. No. So he would come up with a new term. It's called Varna, Varna. Varna is the original Hindu, the term prescribed in the scriptures. But in reality, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. But what we do is when you would switch from caste to Varna, what it's doing is market is, again, outsiders, the Westerners. So the Westerners will say, see, Gandhi doesn't believe in that. He's out there to break it. So it's those kind of things are going on, those kind of manipulations are going on, even when Gandhi is sitting in India and he's manipulating some audience in 10,000 miles away. It's fascinating what was going on through the media. But in reality is he absolutely believed in the very idea of the caste system. It's holy. The system is sacred. The slaves must have their own slaves. And a small upper caste Hindu must have a large base of slaves. And they have made it so good that even the slaves are going to have their own version of slaves. I mean, where can you build a system like that and then you protect it by what we call the caste system? We'll talk another time. What system was built in to protect this caste hierarchy? Okay? And how it penetrated deep into our minds that an untouchable will never get out of this thing. He is deep, even if he gets a PhD degree, he is trapped into it. He can't get out of it. It's such a mass level, the brainwashing going on. How did they do it? And that's something I think today in the 21st century, we need to take a closer look. What really happened? And maybe we need to learn something out of them. Maybe perhaps if there's a way to break the system, then maybe we need to take a look at it, how to do it. But it's a fascinating, yes, it's a fascinating system. Yeah, the British tried, thanks to the British at the time, they did create some sort of a affirmative action, some sort of reservations for them so that they can start moving forward, give them more education. They did that. And there have been noticeable differences of improvements in their laws. Okay? But again, but if you look at the whole block, it didn't make a difference at all. In fact, if you look back today, majority, those who become educated among the untouchables, they become more entrenched in the preservation of the system. That's another tragedy of this whole thing. That educated people who become their leaders, they're more interested in to keep them at the bottom. So the untouchables become prey, not only to the upper caste, but they become prey to their own leaders. It's this fascinating mechanism going on and why they can't get out of it. Now, the Constitution of India, the Article 17, it abolishes untouchability, but it does not abolish untouchables. Untouchables are there. Secondly, it does not define what untouchability is. Nobody knows. Everybody thinks somewhere in a vague idea. Even when Dr. Martin Luther King went to India in 1959, and he came back, I mean, obviously he met the untouchables over there, but when he came back, he's asking, what is this untouchability that the Indians are talking about, that the Indian Constitution has abolished it? But the caste system remains intact. It remains intact, valid, legal. So if caste system is there and you say we're going to remove untouchability, it doesn't make sense. It does not make sense. The untouchability is integral part of Hindu faith. Just as anti-Semitism of the Nazis is that joined in, and there is no way you can cut it off. So when they say untouchability is abolished in the Indian Constitution, what they don't tell you here, untouchability is with the quotation marks. Nobody has defined it. Nobody has tells us what that really means. So it's just a word with no meaning. And it's used for propaganda purpose.
Yeah, and Colonel Singh, what I find fascinating about this whole system, this very historic system, is that it actually is a snapshot. It is reflected in so many other societies, but particularly totalitarian societies, where a very small ruling elite control the population. And we've seen it many times in history, even in recent history, where a very small ruling elite have complete control over the larger population. And they are clever. And as I referred to earlier, the clever part of this system, it's like a giant Ponzi scheme, as we call it. It's like we feed, every layer has a stake, every layer benefits from the system in some respect, so it is in their interest to keep the system in place, apart from that very, very lowest level, the untouchables. So it's very clearly a system that has worked very successfully for thousands of years for the Hindus, and I would guess then it has been copied by totalitarian regimes to an extreme extent the world over. Would you agree with that?
Yes, yes. Now I give you some other perspective. When communism, when Vladimir Lenin took over Soviet Union, Russia, the whole idea was that they were looking one time, this India is a great place to bring about communist revolution. All we got is the people at the bottom, and they had this idea that they can bring about this revolution among these people, only to find that out. Hell no. You cannot bring a revolution over there because this system is controlled by the upper caste, especially the Brahmins. And they are the only people who can bring revolution, if ever there is a word, actual meaning of revolution. It failed. It failed to bring about a revolution over there. The trouble, however, as I have spent decades into this thing, what I found, the only reason this hierarchy is stable is because the slaves loved slavery. Slaves love slavery. They may complain to you a million things here and there, but when it all comes down to at the bottom, they like to stay right where they are. And this is exactly what the British officials also found, that they cannot change these people in measurable ways. They cannot touch them.
It's
The
called
brainwashing was so deep.
Yeah, Colonel Singh, in the West, we call it Stockholm syndrome, and this is where a captive, becomes friendly with the person who has taken them captive, and they treat them. They almost see them as a benign figure. So essentially, it's Stockholm syndrome on a society level, isn't it?
Right. You're right. That's another way to describe them. But here, this is fascinating. With the Stockholm syndrome, this version in the caste hierarchy, boy, it's been there for thousands of years. It's been working for that long, and then working against 85% of the population. I mean, this is really a mind-boggling. How did this happen? How did this happen? Okay, and I think we need to look into the caste system, the system that protects it. That system. I think often enough we don't pay attention to the system. Okay, that system is actually responsible to take that virus deep inside and plant it right there, and it cannot come out. That system, I think we need to pay close attention. That system has never been looked into it. How does that happen? That's perhaps another time, just on the caste system. Okay? And perhaps once we understand, maybe there are ways that this system can be unraveled, if there's a way to do it. Okay? I've been studying this for decades, how to do it if there's a way to do it, okay? Upper caste Hindus, when I talk to educated Hindus, often enough, they play with me the same game that the Gandhi played oh, caste, no, this is not exactly what it used to be. It was a good system. It was just a division of labor and that kind of stuff. So they play that game. There's no way they can do this. They can undo the system. There's no way. It has to come in from people like you, people like other Sikhs and so for others who can really help out to break this system. Okay, it has to come from outside. And doing that, it also needs help from inside, especially the untouchables and the Sudra, other elements. Okay, they need to come forward and they need to say enough is enough. We are not going to be slaves anymore. Okay, and this system that Dr. Martin Luther King saw there, that's a deception. That's a deception. Well, I'll give you another. When he went there, he spent 1 month in 1959. And he did see the untouchables, and he was shocked because he saw them malnourished. He saw them hungry, starving, and he saw nobody's feeding them. So one of the things that you have to commend Dr. King during the time that he came back, he was asking money. He was not as you asking, he said, we got enough food here. Why don't we send this food to those people in India so we can feed them? In other words, he recognized that Indians, that is Indian establishment, they're not going to feed these people. We in the West are to bring out this food and send it over there to feed them. I think he was right. I really think he was right. That in order for us to take care of those people, well, the food has to come from the West. I mean, that was what was happening. And you can go through his speeches that he was deeply, deeply affected by what he saw there. And he himself thought that he was an untouchable. Because he said, me being a Negro, okay, me being an African American, and he felt the way my condition or my people's condition is in America, he felt we are also untouchables. Rightly so. His observation was right. Okay, so a lot of these things, I think we need to take a look at it, reassess from a fresh angles, not the angles of the caste Hindus. Just keep that in mind. They're gonna confuse you. Okay, get them out of this and reassess again. What can we do to make things better for these people, so that they can be truly, in a true sense, free people. Okay. You got anything else?
Yeah, one final question. It's just one final question, Colonel Singh, really. I think, in brief, do you think this system will one day break apart? Do you feel positive that the future will bring an end?
Yes, great question. Angus, the only reason this system is intact today, just as it was intact during Gandhi time and before, there's only one reason. It says that 85% of that population is at the base, which gives stability to the hierarchy. If that stability is gone, the system crumbles. It's that simple as that. Now, how does that happen? It ain't going to happen through the medium of Hinduism. That I can tell you. We can talk about what Hinduism is at another time. It's not going to happen. So it has to come from other religions, if other religions can provide true freedom. Or it can have a revolution from within, which I told you, revolution from within I don't see it coming. Okay? So it has to come from a new ideology, new belief system that give them some hope, so they can move forward. British tried that. I have to be honest with you. British tried that. They failed. They recognized that what we call the Hinduism, we can talk another time. What really is it? How it takes you deep inside and captures you. What is it about it? Not only that, slaves become owners of other slaves. Slaves begin to love slavery. What is it about it so special that it captures you and captures you for generations, for thousands of years? So what is it? I think if we can begin to address those things, maybe we can begin to move forward. I think there's a way to do it, but there's no shortcut. There's no shortcut. And Hindus, upper caste, they're not going to like you for doing that. So be prepared for that also. They're not going to like you for trying to destroy their hierarchy.
Understandable, but a fascinating topic. But there, unfortunately, we must leave it. But we will be talking again with Colonel Singh soon to continue this discussion. Colonel Singh, it has been an absolute pleasure as always. Thank you so much for joining us.
Take care. Thank you again.
And thank you for watching the Satluj TV podcast. We will see you next time.